Mallory Sinclair stood frozen behind the counter of her boutique store, staring at her phone screen as if the image displayed there might somehow rearrange itself into something less devastating. The photo showed Trevor, her husband of 5 years, leaning across a candlelit table toward a woman with auburn hair and crimson lips. His hand covered hers. Their faces were so close that their foreheads nearly touched. The intimate glow of the restaurant lighting wrapped around them like a cocoon, and the look in his eyes, that softness she thought belonged only to her, now belonged to someone else. The phone buzzed again in her trembling hand. Another message from Nadia Petrov, her best friend since college. "I'm so sorry to be the one to show you this. I wanted to tell you in person, but I couldn't wait. You needed to know." Mallory's fingers moved automatically across the screen. "It's okay. Thank you for this." The words felt mechanical, disconnected from the chaos erupting inside her chest. Around her, the store continued its mundane Tuesday afternoon rhythm. A customer browsed the scarves near the window. Soft jazz played through the speakers. The air conditioning hummed its steady white noise. Everything appeared normal, ordinary, untouched by the earthquake that had just shattered the foundation of her life. She glanced at the time on her phone. 2:47 in the afternoon. Trevor had texted her just an hour ago, a casual message saying he was heading out to watch the game with his buddies from work. She had believed him without question, without even a flicker of doubt. Why would she doubt him? They had built a life together. They had a 5-year-old son. They had mortgage payments and family dinners and inside jokes that nobody else understood. They had history, but apparently, they also had lies. Mallory forced herself to breathe, to maintain the professional composure that had carried her through countless difficult days as a store manager. She approached the customer near the window with a practiced smile that felt like shattered glass against her face. "Finding everything okay?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor threatening to break through. The woman, elderly with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, looked up and smiled. "Yes, dear, just browsing." "These scarves are lovely." "Take your time," Mallory replied, already retreating toward the back office. She caught the eye of her assistant manager, a college student named Beth, and gestured toward the office. "I need to make a quick phone call. Can you watch the floor?" Beth nodded, her ponytail bouncing with youthful energy that suddenly seemed impossibly distant to Mallory. Had she ever been that young, that unburdened by betrayal? In the small office, cluttered with inventory boxes and paperwork, Mallory locked the door and sank into the rolling chair behind the desk. She pulled up the photo again, forcing herself to examine every detail with the cold precision of a detective studying crime scene evidence. The restaurant looked expensive, intimate, definitely not the sports bar where Trevor claimed to be watching the game. The woman wore a navy blue dress that hugged her figure, professional but alluring. Her smile was bright, confident, the smile of someone who had no idea she was helping to destroy a family. Or maybe she knew exactly what she was doing. Mallory's hands clenched into fists. The rage came in waves, hot and suffocating, followed by a cold numbness that spread through her limbs like ice water in her veins. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw something. She wanted to call Trevor right now and demand answers, to hear his voice stumble over excuses and lies. But something deeper, some instinct for self-preservation and strategic thinking, held her back. She needed to be smart about this. She needed to maintain control. She looked at the photo one more time before closing it. The image was already burned into her memory, every detail etched with painful clarity. The way his thumb stroked the back of the woman's hand. The wine glasses on the table, half empty. The bread basket pushed to the side, forgotten in their absorption with each other. This was not a business dinner. This was not a coincidental encounter. This was intimacy, connection, desire. This was betrayal in its purest form. Mallory checked her watch. She had 3 more hours before her shift ended. 3 more hours before she could pick up Elliot from Lenore's house. 3 hours to decide how to confront the man who had promised to love and cherish her until death do them part. 3 hours to transform from a shocked, devastated wife into someone who could handle this nightmare with dignity and strength. She opened her phone's notes app and began typing, her fingers moving with mechanical precision across the screen. She needed a plan. She needed to know what she was going to say, how she was going to react, what her boundaries were. Trevor would try to explain, to minimize, to make excuses. Men always did, but she would not let him gaslight her into doubting what she had seen with her own eyes. The anger was good, she realized. The anger would carry her through this. It would keep her spine straight, and her voice steady when every instinct screamed at her to crumble into pieces. Her phone buzzed with another message from Nadia. "Are you okay? Do you need me to come to the store? I can be there in 20 minutes. Mallory typed back quickly. "I'm okay. Need to finish my shift. Can we talk tonight?" "Anytime. I'm here. I love you." Those 3 words from her friend broke something loose in Mallory's chest. Tears finally came, silent and hot, streaming down her face as she sat alone in the cluttered office. She gave herself exactly 2 minutes to cry, watching the seconds tick by on the wall clock. 2 minutes to feel the full weight of this betrayal, to let the pain wash through her like acid. Then she stood, wiped her face with a tissue from the box on her desk, and checked her reflection in the small mirror hanging on the back of the door. Her eyes were red, but not swollen. Her mascara had held up reasonably well. She looked like someone who might have seasonal allergies, not someone whose husband was cheating on her. Good enough. Mallory returned to the sales floor with her shoulders back and her chin up. She helped customers, processed transactions, restocked shelves, and smiled until her face ached. Nobody would have guessed that inside, she was already planning the confrontation that would change everything. She was already deciding which pieces of her life she would fight to keep and which she would let burn to ash. At 6 o'clock, she locked up the store and drove to Lenore's house in the suburbs. The older woman lived in a modest 2-story home with a garden that burst with color every spring. Mallory had always loved this house, had always felt welcomed here. Lenore had been more of a mother to her than her own mother, who had passed away from cancer when Mallory was just 19. The thought of telling Lenore what her son had done made Mallory's stomach clench with fresh anxiety. But first, she needed to see Elliot. She needed to hold her son and remember what she was fighting for. Lenore opened the door with a warm smile that faded the moment she saw Mallory's face. "Sweetheart, what's wrong? You look pale." "Just a long day at work," Mallory said, forcing brightness into her voice. "Headache, you know how it is." But Lenore's sharp eyes, the same hazel shade as Trevor's, studied her with maternal concern. "Are you sure? You seem upset." "I'm fine, really. Where's Elliot?" "In the living room, watching his cartoon." "Mallory, if something is bothering you, you can talk to me. You know that, right?" The kindness in Lenore's voice nearly undid Mallory's careful composure. She wanted desperately to tell this woman, to watch the shock and fury cross her face, to have an ally in the storm that was coming. But Trevor deserved to be confronted first. He deserved to face his wife before his mother knew what he had done. "I know," Mallory said softly. "I promise, I'm just tired. It's been a busy week." Elliot came running into the foyer, his dark hair mussed and his cheeks flushed with excitement. "Mommy!" He crashed into her legs with the full force of his small body, and Mallory scooped him up, breathing in the familiar scent of his strawberry shampoo and the faint smell of the cookies Lenore had probably let him eat after dinner. "Hi, baby," she whispered against his hair. "Did you have fun with Grandma? We played blocks, and she let me help make cookies, and we watched the dinosaur show." The words tumbled out in an excited rush, and Mallory held him tighter. This perfect, innocent creature who had no idea that his father was tearing their family apart. "That sounds wonderful." She kissed his forehead and set him down. "Go get your backpack, okay? We need to head home." As Elliot ran back toward the living room, Lenore touched Mallory's arm gently. "You would tell me if something was seriously wrong, wouldn't you? If you needed help?" Mallory met her mother-in-law's gaze and saw genuine concern there, genuine love. "Yes," she said quietly, "I would tell you, and I will. Just not tonight." Understanding flickered in Lenore's eyes, tinged with worry. "All right, but call me if you need anything. Anytime." "I will. Thank you, Lenore, for everything." The drive home felt surreal. Elliot chattered in his car seat about dinosaurs and cookies, while Mallory navigated familiar streets on autopilot, her mind already at home, already setting the stage for the confrontation that would determine the course of all their futures. She had made her decision during those long hours at the store. She would not yell. She would not beg. She would not give Trevor the satisfaction of seeing her completely broken. She would be calm, controlled, and utterly unforgiving. At home, their two-bedroom apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in with accumulated memories. Photos of their wedding hung in the hallway. Elliot's artwork decorated the refrigerator. Trevor's running shoes sat by the front door, exactly where he always left them. Everything looked normal, preserved in the amber of routine and habit. But nothing would ever be normal again. Mallory gave Elliot a bath, read him 2 bedtime stories, and tucked him into bed with his favorite stuffed elephant. "I love you, sweetheart," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "Love you too, Mommy. Where's Daddy?" The innocent question pierced her heart. "He'll be home soon. Sleep tight." She closed his bedroom door softly and stood in the hallway for a long moment, gathering her strength. Then she walked to the kitchen and began her preparations. She made herself a cup of chamomile tea, the ritual soothing even though her hands still trembled slightly. She took a banana from the fruit bowl on the counter. She retrieved a sharp knife from the drawer, and then she arranged them on a plate in the center of the kitchen table. The banana lay horizontally, and she positioned the knife so it appeared to be cutting through the yellow fruit, though she had not actually sliced it. The symbolism was unmistakable, visceral, perfectly clear. Mallory sat down at the table with her tea and waited. Trevor arrived home at 9:37, much later than he had promised. Mallory heard his key in the lock, heard the familiar sounds of him entering the apartment, dropping his keys in the ceramic bowl by the door, hanging his jacket on the coat rack. She listened to his footsteps moving through the living room, heard him pause, probably noticing the unusual silence. No television playing. No sounds of her moving around preparing for the next day. "Mallory?" His voice carried a note of uncertainty. "Babe, you still up?" She did not answer. She simply took another sip of her tea, now lukewarm, and waited. The cup felt solid and real in her hands, grounding her to this moment, this confrontation she had been rehearsing in her mind for hours. His footsteps moved toward the kitchen, and then he appeared in the doorway. Trevor Sinclair, at 39 years old, was still handsome, in that casual, approachable way that had first attracted her in college. Dark hair starting to show threads of silver at the temples, hazel eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Average height, average build, the kind of man who blended into a crowd but stood out to the people who knew him well, or thought they knew him well. He smiled when he saw her, that easy, familiar smile that had greeted her thousands of times over the years. "Hey, you're still up. I thought you'd be in bed by now." Then his gaze shifted to the table, to the plate positioned directly in front of where he stood. The smile froze on his face. "What is that?" Mallory took another deliberate sip of her tea before responding. Her voice emerged calm, almost conversational. "What does it look like?" Trevor stared at the banana and knife, his expression shifting from confusion to something that looked almost like recognition, though he fought to keep his face neutral. "I don't understand. Is this some kind of joke?" "Do you love her?" Mallory asked, her eyes never leaving his face. She watched every micro-expression, every flicker of emotion that crossed his features. She had spent 5 years learning to read this man, and right now Despite his attempts to appear confused, she could see the panic beginning to bloom behind his eyes. "Love who? Mallory, what are you talking about? I just got back from watching the game with the guys." His voice carried forced lightness, but his hands had moved to his pockets, a defensive gesture she recognized. He always put his hands in his pockets when he was uncomfortable or lying. She had noticed it years ago when he told small white lies about forgetting to take out the trash or missing a call from his mother. "Honey, please," Mallory said quietly, setting down her teacup with careful precision. "Spare me. Spare yourself. Spare us both. Just tell the truth." Trevor's face flushed. "I am telling the truth. I was at the sports bar with Mark and David and some other guys from work. We watched the whole game. The Wildcats won by 7 points in the last quarter. If you don't believe me, you can call Mark right now." The lies flowed so smoothly from his mouth that for a brief, disorienting moment, Mallory almost questioned what she had seen. Almost. But then she remembered the photo, burned into her memory with perfect clarity. She reached for her phone on the table and pulled up the image, turning the screen toward him without a word. Trevor's face drained of all color. He stood completely still, staring at the photograph as if it might disappear if he looked at it long enough. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating, filled with the weight of everything that could never be unsaid or undone. "I didn't know your work friends liked to wear dresses," Mallory said softly, "or that the sports bar got so fancy with the tablecloths and wine glasses." Trevor's eyes finally lifted from the phone to her face. She watched him struggle, saw the moment he realized there was no way to talk his way out of this, no explanation that would make the image on that screen anything other than what it obviously was. His shoulders sagged slightly. When he spoke, his voice had lost its defensive edge, replaced by something that sounded almost like defeat. "Mallory, I can explain." "Then explain." She leaned back in her chair, maintaining that eerie calm that felt like armor around her heart. Inside, she was screaming. Inside, she was shattering into 1,000 irreparable pieces. But on the outside, she remained still, controlled, waiting. "It's not what it looks like. I mean, it is, but it's not as bad as you think." The words tumbled out quickly now, desperate. Trevor moved toward the table, reaching for the chair across from her, but Mallory held up one hand. "Stay there. I want to see your face clearly when you tell me whatever lie you've prepared." He flinched at that, but remained standing. "It was just dinner. Just one dinner. We got carried away. Maybe we flirted a little, but nothing happened. I swear to you, nothing happened." "Who is she?" "Her name is Candace. She sells office equipment. She came by the office a few weeks ago to pitch her company's products, and we got talking. She seemed nice, that's all. We ran into each other again at a coffee shop last week, and we just started chatting. It was innocent, Mallory. I swear it was innocent." Mallory felt the rage building in her chest like a living thing, hot and violent, threatening to explode, but she kept her voice level. "So innocent that you lied to me about where you were tonight. So innocent that you're leaning across a table holding her hand and looking at her the way you used to look at me. So innocent that someone felt compelled to photograph it and send it to my best friend. Tell me, Trevor, do you hold hands and gaze into the eyes of all your innocent acquaintances?" "We had some wine. We got a little carried away. But I stopped it, Mallory. When she suggested we go somewhere else, I said no. I came home." "After how long?" Mallory's voice cut through his excuses like a blade. "How long were you sitting in that restaurant with her? An hour? 2 hours? How long have you been lying to me?" Trevor's face crumpled. Tears began to stream down his cheeks, and Mallory felt a savage satisfaction at seeing him cry. Good. He should cry. He should feel even a fraction of the pain currently tearing through her chest. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. It was stupid. It meant nothing. She means nothing. Then why did you do it? I don't know. I don't know. Things have been stressful at work, and you've been busy with the store, and we barely see each other anymore. I felt lonely, I guess. When she paid attention to me, it felt good. It felt like how things used to be with us, back in college. But I know that's not an excuse. I know I screwed up. Please, Mallory, please give me a chance to make this right. The manipulation in his words made her want to scream. He was trying to shift blame, to make this somehow about their busy schedules, about her working long hours at the store, as if his choice to betray her was somehow her fault for not being available enough, attentive enough, whatever enough. Men, all liars. Mallory stood slowly, her chair scraping against the tile floor. She picked up her phone and held it up so he could see the image again. Look at this photo and tell me again that nothing happened. Look at it and tell me this was just an innocent dinner that got a little out of hand. Because I am looking at a man who is absolutely absorbed in another woman. I am looking at intimacy, Trevor. I am looking at desire. And I am looking at betrayal. Okay. Trevor's voice broke on the word. Okay. We kissed. In the parking lot, after dinner, we kissed. But that was it. I swear, on Elliot's life. We kissed. And then we both realized how wrong it was. She's married too. She has 3 kids. We both agreed right there that it was a mistake, and that we wouldn't see each other again. It was one kiss, Mallory. One stupid, meaningless kiss. One kiss. The words echoed in Mallory's mind. Did he really think that made it better? Did he actually believe that minimizing the physical act somehow erased the emotional betrayal? He had spent an evening with another woman, had held her hand, had looked at her with longing, had kissed her. Whether it went further than that or not, he had already crossed every line that mattered. 5 years of marriage, Mallory said, her voice finally beginning to shake with the emotion she could no longer fully contain. 5 years of building a life together. We have a son, Trevor. We have a child who loves you and trusts you and thinks you hung the moon. And you threw all of that away for what? For some woman you barely know? For a few hours of feeling special? I didn't throw it away. We can fix this. People make mistakes, Mallory. People mess up, and then they work through it. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever you want. Just please, please don't give up on us. Mallory shook her head slowly. The tears she had been holding back finally began to fall, hot tracks down her cheeks that she did not bother to wipe away. You should have thought about that before you sat down across from her at that restaurant. You should have thought about Elliot before you held her hand. You should have thought about me before you kissed her. Trevor moved toward her, his arms outstretched as if to embrace her, to offer comfort for the pain he had caused. The absurdity of it made something snap inside Mallory's chest. "Don't you dare touch me," she said sharply, stepping back. "Don't you dare!" He stopped, his arms falling to his sides. Fresh tears streamed down his face, and his whole body seemed to tremble. "I love you, Mallory. I love you so much. This doesn't change that. I made a horrible mistake, but I love you. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this." Her voice was cold now, all the heat of her anger crystallizing into something hard and sharp. "If you loved me, you would have come home when you said you would. If you loved me, you would have told that woman you were married the first time she showed interest. If you loved me, I wouldn't be standing here looking at a photograph of my husband with another woman." Silence fell between them again, but this time it was different. This time it carried the weight of finality, of something broken beyond repair. Mallory could see the moment Trevor realized it too, could see the desperation in his eyes as he understood that his tears and apologies were not going to be enough. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. "I want you to call her right now," Mallory said, pulling her spine straight and forcing steel into her voice. "I want you to call Candace right now and tell her that whatever this was, it's over. Tell her that you told your wife everything and that you will never contact her again." Trevor nodded quickly, eagerly, pulling his phone from his pocket with shaking hands. "Okay, yes, I'll do that right now." "And then," Mallory continued, her voice cutting through his hasty compliance, "you are going to tell her that she has 24 hours to confess everything to her own husband. If she doesn't tell him within 24 hours, I will. I will find him, and I will show him the same photo that was shown to me. I will make sure he knows exactly what his wife has been doing." Trevor's face went pale again. "Mallory, no, you can't do that. She has kids. You'll destroy her family." The hypocrisy of his words struck Mallory like a physical blow. "I'll destroy her family?" Her voice rose for the first time, sharp and cutting. "I'll destroy her family? What do you think you've been doing to ours? She made her choices just like you made yours. Her husband deserves to know the truth, just like I deserve to know the truth. Call her. Now. Please," Trevor begged. "Please, don't make me do this. She'll lose everything. Her husband will leave her. She'll lose her kids. Then she should have thought about that before she decided to have dinner with a married man, before she held his hand, before she kissed him in a parking lot." Mallory's voice was relentless now, cold and hard as stone. "Call her, Trevor, or I will call her husband myself right now. Your choice." With trembling fingers, Trevor scrolled through his phone and pressed a number. Mallory felt a sick satisfaction watching him struggle, watching him face even this small consequence of his actions. The phone rang on speaker, the sound filling the kitchen like an alarm. A woman's voice answered, slightly breathless. "Trevor, why are you calling? We said we wouldn't contact each other anymore." So it was not the first call, not the first conversation. Another lie exposed, another layer of betrayal revealed. Mallory's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but she remained silent, letting Trevor dig himself deeper. "Candace, I need to tell you something." His voice shook. "My wife knows. She saw a photo of us at the restaurant. She knows everything." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Candace spoke again, her voice had changed, becoming high and panicked. "What? How? Oh my God! Trevor, what did you tell her?" "I told her the truth, that we had dinner, that we kissed, that it was a mistake, and it's over." "Is she there? Is she listening right now?" Trevor looked at Mallory, who nodded once. "Yes," he said quietly. "Mrs. Sinclair." Candace's voice came through the speaker, tight with fear and something that might have been desperation. "I am so sorry. Your husband is telling you the truth. It was one dinner, one mistake. We both regretted it immediately. Please, please don't tell my husband. He'll take my children away from me. Please." Mallory stepped closer to the phone, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You have 24 hours to tell him yourself. If you don't, I will. And trust me when I say that my version will be much worse than yours. Please, you don't understand. He's not a forgiving man. He'll destroy me. Please." "Then you should have been faithful to him," Mallory said coldly. 24 hours, Candace. Starting now." She reached over and ended the call, cutting off the woman's protests. Trevor stood there, phone still in his hand, looking lost and small, in a way Mallory had never seen before. "What happens now?" he whispered. Mallory walked to the linen closet in the hallway and pulled out a pillow and blanket. She returned to the kitchen and threw them at Trevor. They hit his chest and fell to the floor. "You sleep on the couch tonight. Tomorrow, we figure out the rest." "Mallory, please, can't we talk about this? Can't we try to work through it tonight?" "There's nothing to work through," Mallory said, her voice flat and final. "Our marriage is over, Trevor. You killed it the moment you sat down across from that woman and chose her over your family. Now get out of my sight before I say something I can't take back." She turned and walked toward the bedroom, her back straight and her head high, even though inside she was collapsing. She heard Trevor's broken sob behind her, but did not turn around. She closed the bedroom door, locked it, and finally allowed herself to fall apart. Mallory slid down the door until she was sitting on the floor, her arms wrapped around her knees, and cried. She cried for the marriage that was ending. She cried for the trust that could never be rebuilt. She cried for Elliot, who would grow up in a broken home. She cried for the life she had imagined, the future she had planned, all of it now shattered beyond recognition. But underneath the tears, underneath the devastating pain, there was also something else, something cold and determined and absolutely unbreakable. Trevor had betrayed her, but she would not let him destroy her. She would survive this. She would build a new life. And she would make absolutely certain that both he and Candace paid the full price for what they had done. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. Morning came too quickly, and not quickly enough. Mallory had spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through scenarios, possibilities, and the grim reality of what came next. She had dozed fitfully around 4 in the morning, only to jolt awake an hour later with her heart pounding, and the image of that photograph seared into her consciousness once again. For a few merciful seconds upon waking, she had forgotten. Then reality crashed back down with crushing weight. She could hear movement in the apartment. Trevor was awake. She heard the coffee maker gurgling in the kitchen, heard his footsteps moving carefully, quietly, as if he could somehow tiptoe around the destruction he had caused. Mallory pulled herself out of bed and looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her eyes were swollen and red, her face pale and drawn. She looked like someone who had been through a war, and in a way, she supposed she had been. But she could not afford to look weak. Not today. Not when she needed to be strong for what was coming. She showered, letting the hot water wash away the physical evidence of her tears, even if it could not touch the pain beneath. She dressed in dark jeans and a simple sweater, pulled her hair back into a neat ponytail, and applied just enough makeup to look human. When she finally emerged from the bedroom, she found Trevor sitting at the kitchen table, still wearing yesterday's clothes, looking haggard and defeated. He stood immediately when he saw her. "Mallory, I made coffee. Can we please talk? Really talk? There's nothing to talk about until we know whether Candace told her husband or not." Mallory's voice was flat, emotionless. She poured herself a cup of coffee and added cream, the mundane domestic ritual feeling surreal given the circumstances. She will. She was terrified. She'll tell him. We'll see. Mallory checked her phone. 7:15 in the morning. Elliot would be waking up soon. She needed to maintain some semblance of normalcy for her son, even as everything else fell apart around them. As if summoned by her thoughts, she heard Elliot's bedroom door open and his small feet padding down the hallway. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing his eyes, his stuffed elephant dangling from one hand. "Mommy? Daddy? Why is Daddy sleeping on the couch?" Trevor's face crumpled with fresh pain, but Mallory moved quickly, sweeping Elliot into her arms. "Daddy wasn't feeling well last night, sweetie. He didn't want to keep Mommy awake with his tossing and turning." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but necessary. Elliot was too young to understand what was happening. He deserved to be protected from this mess for as long as possible. "Are you feeling better now, Daddy?" Elliot asked innocently, looking at his father over Mallory's shoulder. Trevor's eyes filled with tears again, but he forced a smile. "Yeah, buddy, I'm feeling better." Mallory set Elliot down and began preparing his breakfast, moving through the familiar motions while her mind worked through the logistics of the day ahead. She needed to call the store and request time off. She needed to contact Nadia and get the name of a good divorce attorney. She needed to document everything, save every piece of evidence, prepare for the legal battle that was coming. Most importantly, she needed to talk to Lenore. After breakfast, after Elliot was settled in front of his morning cartoons, Mallory pulled out her phone and texted her mother-in-law. "Can you come over this morning? I need to talk to you about something important." The response came within seconds. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Is everything okay?" Mallory did not respond. There was no way to answer that question honestly in a text message. When Lenore arrived, Mallory met her at the door and led her to the kitchen, away from where Elliot was watching television. Trevor had retreated to the bedroom, understanding without being told that this conversation needed to happen. Lenore took one look at Mallory's face, and her own expression shifted from concern to alarm. What happened? Is it Elliot? Is he sick? Elliot is fine. Mallory gestured to a chair at the kitchen table, the same table where the banana and knife had sat last night, where she had confronted Trevor with his betrayal. Please, sit down. Lenore sat slowly, her sharp eyes never leaving Mallory's face. You're scaring me, honey. What's going on? Mallory sat across from her and pulled out her phone. Without preamble, without softening the blow, she turned the screen to show Lenore the photograph. Your son has been having an affair. This was taken 2 nights ago. Lenore stared at the image, her face going through the same progression of emotions Mallory had experienced. Confusion, disbelief, recognition, and finally, fury. Her hands began to shake. When she looked up at Mallory, her eyes blazed with an anger Mallory had never seen before. That son of a... Lenore's voice was low and dangerous. That absolute fool. Where is he? In the bedroom. Lenore stood so abruptly, her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She marched toward the bedroom with a determination that would have been frightening if Mallory had not been so numb. She heard the bedroom door slam open, heard Lenore's voice rise in a torrent of fury. Trevor James Sinclair, get out here right now! Trevor emerged from the bedroom looking like a man facing execution. Lenore stood in the hallway, her small frame somehow seeming larger with rage. How could you? She hissed, mindful of Elliot in the other room, but unable to completely contain her anger. How could you do this to your family? To your wife? To your son? Mom, don't you dare make excuses to me. I raised you better than this. Your father, God rest his soul, would be ashamed. I am ashamed. Trevor's face crumpled, and he began to cry again, but Lenore showed no sympathy. She turned to Mallory, her expression softening only slightly. What do you need from me? Whatever it is, you have my full support. You and Elliot both. The validation, the unwavering support, nearly broke through Mallory's careful control. She swallowed hard against the lump in her throat. Thank you, Lenore. I'm going to file for divorce. I need to find a good attorney. I know someone. Fiona Blackwell. She's aggressive, she's expensive, and she wins. Lenore pulled out her own phone and began typing. I'm sending you her number right now. Tell her I referred you. She'll take your case. Mom, please, Trevor said desperately. You don't understand. It was a mistake. We can fix this. Lenore rounded on her son with such force that he actually stepped backward. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. A mistake is being late for dinner. What you did was a choice. Multiple choices. You chose to lie. You chose to meet another woman. You chose to betray your wife and your son. Those were not mistakes, Trevor. Those were decisions. And you will live with the consequences. The doorbell rang, cutting through the tense silence. Mallory frowned. She was not expecting anyone else. She moved to the door and looked through the peephole, her stomach dropping when she saw a man she did not recognize, standing on the doorstep. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with graying hair and a face tight with barely controlled rage. She opened the door cautiously, keeping the chain lock engaged. Can I help you? Are you Mallory Sinclair? His voice was rough, strained. Yes. Who are you? My name is Richard Whitmore. I believe you know my wife, Candace. Mallory's heart began to pound. She glanced back at Trevor, who had gone completely pale. So Candace had told him. The 24-hour deadline had not even been necessary. I don't know your wife, Mr. Whitmore, but I know of her. Richard's jaw clenched. She told me everything this morning. About the dinner, about the kiss, about my wife carrying on with your husband for the past 4 months. 4 months. The words hit Mallory like a physical blow. 4 months. Not one dinner. Not one mistake. 4 months of lies, of secret meetings, of betrayal so deep and sustained that it made everything Trevor had told her last night nothing but more lies, stacked upon lies. 4 months? Mallory heard her own voice, distant and hollow. She turned to look at Trevor, who stood frozen in the hallway. You told me it was one dinner, one kiss. You looked me in the eyes and swore it was one mistake. Trevor's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Richard Whitmore pushed slightly against the door, not threatening, but desperate. I'm sorry to come here like this. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you. But my wife finally broke down this morning and told me the truth. They've been seeing each other for 4 months, meeting for lunch, sending messages, making plans. This wasn't one mistake. This was a full-blown affair. Mallory felt the room spin. She unhooked the chain and opened the door fully, letting Richard inside. He was a big man, intimidating in his size and current fury, but Mallory felt no fear. If anything, she felt a strange kinship with this stranger, who had been betrayed just as she had been. Lenore appeared beside Mallory, her presence solid and reassuring. Come in, Mr. Whitmore. It seems we all need to have a conversation. They moved to the living room. Mallory checked on Elliot, who was still absorbed in his cartoons, then turned the volume up slightly before returning to where Richard stood, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Trevor had not moved from his position in the hallway, looking like he wanted to disappear entirely. Tell me everything, Mallory said to Richard, her voice eerily calm. Tell me everything your wife told you. Richard's story poured out in a rush of anger and pain. Candace had met Trevor when she visited his office to sell equipment. They had exchanged numbers supposedly for business purposes. The texting started innocently, or so Candace claimed, but escalated quickly. They began meeting for coffee, then lunch, then dinner. The photograph Nadia had sent was not from their first date. It was from their most recent one, just 2 nights ago, when Trevor had promised Mallory he was watching a game with friends. She said they never slept together, Richard continued, his voice breaking. She swears they only kissed a few times, but I don't know what to believe anymore. How can I trust anything she says? We've been married for 12 years. We have 3 children, and she threw it all away for him. He gestured toward Trevor with barely concealed contempt. Mallory looked at Trevor, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. The man she had married, the father of her child, had disappeared. In his place stood a liar, a coward, someone capable of sustaining a deception for 4 months while coming home every night and kissing her, sleeping beside her, playing with their son, all while carrying on with another woman. Is it true? She asked quietly. 4 months? Trevor's silence was answer enough. Then, finally, he nodded, tears streaming down his face. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you. I tried to end it multiple times, but I kept going back. I don't know why. I don't know what's wrong with me. What's wrong with you? Lenore said coldly from where she stood near the window. Is that you're selfish. You wanted your stable home life and your little affair on the side. You wanted to have everything without paying the price. Well, congratulations, Trevor. Now you're going to lose it all. Richard turned to Mallory. I'm filing for divorce. My attorney said I should document everything, get statements from anyone who knew. Would you be willing to testify about what you know? About the lies? The deception? Absolutely, Mallory said without hesitation. I'll do whatever I can to help you. Thank you. Richard's voice was rough with emotion. I'm sorry we had to meet like this. I'm sorry your husband involved you and your family in this mess. I'm sorry, too. Your children don't deserve this. Neither does my son. Boyd. After Richard left, after extracting a promise from Mallory to stay in contact and share information, she turned to Trevor with a coldness that seemed to freeze the very air around them. Get out. Mallory, please, get out. Pack a bag and get out of this apartment right now. Go stay with a friend. Go stay at a motel. I don't care. But you are not spending another night under this roof. What about Elliot? I need to see my son. You should have thought about that before you spent 4 months lying to his mother. Mallory's voice was ice. You can see Elliot when my attorney says you can see Elliot. Now get your things and leave before I call the police and have you removed. Trevor looked desperately at his mother, but Lenore's expression remained hard and unforgiving. You heard her, Trevor. Go. You've done enough damage. It took Trevor 15 minutes to pack a bag. 15 minutes during which Mallory sat on the couch next to Elliot, running her fingers through his soft hair, watching him laugh at the cartoon while his entire world crumbled around him without his knowledge. She would have to tell him something eventually, but not today. Today, she just needed to hold him and remember why she had to be strong. When Trevor emerged with his duffel bag, he paused at the door. I love you, Mallory. I love Elliot. I know I messed up, but I love you both so much. Mallory did not look at him. If you loved us, none of this would have happened. Close the door on your way out. She heard the door open and close, heard his footsteps in the hallway outside, heard the sound of him leaving, taking with him any possibility of reconciliation, of forgiveness, of ever going back to what they had been. Lenore sat down beside her and took her hand. You're going to get through this, sweetheart. It's going to hurt like hell, but you're going to survive it, and I'm going to be right here with you every step of the way. Mallory finally allowed herself to lean into Lenore's embrace, to accept the comfort being offered. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for supporting me. Always, Lenore said firmly. You're still my daughter, marriage certificate or not. You and Elliot will always be my family. That afternoon, after Lenore left to give Mallory some space, after Elliot went down for his nap, Mallory called the number Lenore had given her. Fiona Blackwell answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. Miss Blackwell, my name is Mallory Sinclair. Lenore Sinclair referred me to you. I need to file for divorce. Tell me everything, Fiona said, and Mallory did. She told Fiona about the photograph, about the confrontation, about discovering the affair had lasted 4 months instead of being one mistake. She told her about Richard Whitmore and his willingness to testify. She told her about the lies, the deception, the betrayal. With each word, each detail, she felt herself transforming from victim to survivor, from devastated wife to warrior preparing for battle. We're going to destroy him, Fiona said when Mallory finished. The attorney's voice carried a satisfaction that should have been disturbing, but instead felt like validation. By the time we're done, he'll wish he'd never laid eyes on Candace Whitmore. Are you ready for this fight, Mallory? Because it's going to get ugly. Mallory looked around the apartment she had built with Trevor, at the life they had created together. Now nothing but ashes and broken promises. I'm ready, she said. Let's make sure he pays for what he did. And somewhere, in some place she had not known existed inside herself, Mallory felt something cold and fierce and absolutely unbreakable settle into place. Trevor had declared war on their marriage the moment he chose Candace over his family. Now Mallory was going to finish what he started, and she was going to win. The following days unfolded with a surreal quality, as if Mallory were watching her own life from a distance. She went through the motions of normalcy for Elliot's sake, preparing his meals, taking him to the small park near their apartment, reading him bedtime stories with a smile that felt painted on her face. But beneath the surface, she was building a case, documenting everything, preparing for the legal war that Fiona Blackwell promised would be brutal and decisive. Nadia came over every evening after Elliot fell asleep, bringing wine and comfort and fierce loyalty. I should have told you sooner, she said on the third night, sitting cross-legged on Mallory's couch with a glass of red wine in her hands. I saw them together once before, about 3 weeks ago. I wasn't sure it was him at first, and I talked myself out of it. I convinced myself I was mistaken. I'm so sorry. You told me when it mattered, Mallory said quietly. You gave me proof. You did more than most friends would have the courage to do. Still, I keep thinking about how many weeks you spent not knowing, and I could have ended that sooner. Mallory shook her head. Trevor is the only one responsible for what Trevor did. Not you. Not me. Just him. The truth of those words settled into her bones more firmly each day. She had spent the first 48 hours after the confrontation analyzing every moment of their marriage, searching for signs she had missed, wondering what she could have done differently. But that path led only to madness and self-blame. Trevor had made his choices. He had lied, deceived, and betrayed. Nothing Mallory had done or failed to do justified that. On the 5th day after Trevor moved out, Mallory's phone rang with an unknown number. She answered cautiously. Hello? Mrs. Sinclair? This is Detective Karen Phillips with the City Police Department. I'm calling regarding an incident that occurred yesterday afternoon at the Northbridge Corporate Plaza. Do you have a few minutes to speak with me? Mallory's stomach dropped. What kind of incident? There was an altercation in the parking lot between your husband, Trevor Sinclair, and a Mr. Richard Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore confronted Mr. Sinclair at his place of employment. Several witnesses recorded video footage of the encounter, and it has since been posted on social media. We're investigating to determine if charges should be filed. Is Trevor hurt? He has some minor bruising, but declined medical treatment. Mr. Whitmore is significantly larger and could have done much more damage, but appeared to be exercising restraint. From what we can gather, Mr. Whitmore was primarily interested in publicly humiliating Mr. Sinclair rather than physically harming him. After the call ended, Mallory sat staring at her phone for a long moment. Then she opened her social media app and searched for Trevor's name. It did not take long to find the video. Someone had posted it with the caption, "Cheater gets confronted by husband of his mistress outside his work. Karma." The video showed Trevor walking to his car in the parking lot of the building where he worked. Richard Whitmore appeared from between two vehicles, his voice loud and carrying clearly on the recording. Trevor Sinclair, we need to talk about what you did to my family. Trevor had frozen, his face going pale even in the grainy cell phone footage. Richard, I don't think this is the place. You don't think this is the place? Richard's voice had risen. You didn't think it was the place when you were screwing my wife for 4 months either, did you? When you were sending her messages while my kids were at the dinner table? When you were meeting her while I thought she was at work? A crowd had begun to gather. Mallory could see other employees coming out of the building, cell phones already raised to record. Trevor's face had flushed red with humiliation. I'm sorry, Trevor had said, his voice small. I'm so sorry. It was wrong. I know it was wrong. Sorry doesn't give me back the 12 years I invested in my marriage. Sorry doesn't explain to my children why their mother destroyed our family. Sorry doesn't do anything except make you feel better about being a terrible person. Richard had stepped closer, and Trevor had flinched, but the bigger man had not struck him. Instead, he had simply stared at Trevor with contempt so thick it was visible even through the phone screen. You're pathetic. You risked everything for what? For a few stolen hours with someone else's wife? Was it worth it? Was she worth losing your family? Trevor had not answered. He had just stood there, humiliated and exposed, while people watched and recorded. Finally, Richard had turned and walked away, leaving Trevor standing alone in the parking lot while whispers and laughter echoed around him. The video had been viewed over 50,000 times. The comments section was brutal. Cheaters deserve this, and worse. Good for that husband. More people should be called out like this. Trevor Sinclair works at Northbridge? Someone should tell his boss what kind of person they employ. Mallory watched the video 3 times, and each time she felt a savage satisfaction that disturbed and empowered her in equal measure. Trevor was facing consequences. Real, public, unavoidable consequences. His co-workers knew. Strangers on the internet knew. There was no hiding from what he had done. No pretending it had been a private mistake that could be quietly swept away. 2 days after the video went viral, Trevor called her. She almost did not answer, but curiosity won out. "What do you want?" His voice sounded hollow, defeated. "I've been asked to resign from my job. They said it's voluntary resignation, or they'll terminate me for conduct unbecoming of the company's values. Either way, I'm out by the end of the week." Mallory felt no sympathy. "That's what happens when you become a public embarrassment. I know I deserve it. But Mallory, I don't know what I'm going to do. I won't be able to make the mortgage payment. I won't be able to pay child support or alimony or anything. I'll be starting over from nothing. You should have thought about that before you started an affair." Her voice was cold, unmoved by his desperation. "You made your choices, Trevor. These are the consequences. Can I at least see Elliot? Please? I miss my son. My attorney will arrange supervised visitation once the divorce proceedings begin. Until then, no. Mallory, please. He's my son, too. You can't just keep him from me. Watch me." She ended the call and blocked his number. She was done listening to his self-pity, done letting him try to manipulate her emotions. Fiona had advised her to limit all contact, to communicate only through attorneys once the papers were filed. Mallory intended to follow that advice to the letter. The divorce papers were filed 3 weeks after the initial confrontation. Fiona had worked quickly, building a case that painted Trevor as an unfit parent, based on his moral judgment, his loss of employment, and his documented pattern of deception. Mallory provided the photograph, the text messages she had recovered from Trevor's phone before he left, and a detailed timeline of his lies. Richard Whitmore provided a sworn statement about Trevor's affair with his wife, including dates and locations they had met. Even Lenore provided a statement supporting Mallory and expressing concerns about her son's judgment and stability. When Trevor was served with the papers, he called Fiona's office repeatedly, desperate to negotiate, to find some middle ground. But Fiona was as ruthless as Lenore had promised. "Your client had 4 months to think about middle ground," she told Trevor's attorney coolly. "He chose not to. Now he gets to live with the consequences of that choice." The court date was set for 8 weeks out. In that time, Trevor was granted supervised visitation with Elliot every other weekend, 2 hours at a time, at a neutral location with a social worker present. The first visitation was heartbreaking. Elliot cried when he saw his father, confused by the strange woman watching them, confused by why Daddy did not come home anymore. Mallory had to turn away, to hide her own tears as she listened to Elliot's small voice asking questions Trevor could not answer honestly. "Why don't you live with us anymore, Daddy? When are you coming home? Did I do something wrong?" Each question was a knife in her heart, but she steeled herself. This was not her fault. This was Trevor's doing. He had broken their family. He had caused this pain. She would not let guilt manipulate her into softening, into compromising, into giving him anything more than the bare minimum the law required. Candace Whitmore had lost her job as well. Mallory heard this through Richard, who stayed in occasional contact to share information about the ongoing legal proceedings. Several of Candace's corporate clients had complained after the video went viral, and her identity became known. Her company, concerned about their reputation, had let her go. She and Richard were also divorcing, and Richard had filed for full custody of their 3 children based on Candace's infidelity and poor judgment. She moved to another state, Richard told Mallory during one phone call. "She's staying with her sister, trying to find work. She keeps calling, asking me to forgive her, to let her see the kids more than the supervised visits the court granted. But I can't do it. Every time I look at her, all I see is those 4 months of lies." "I understand," Mallory said quietly. "I see the same thing when I look at Trevor. Do you think we'll ever get past this? Ever be able to trust someone again?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with all the pain and betrayal they had both endured. "I don't know," Mallory admitted. "Right now, I can't imagine letting anyone that close again. But maybe someday, maybe when enough time has passed and the wounds aren't so fresh. The court hearing arrived with startling swiftness, despite the weeks of waiting. Mallory dressed carefully that morning in a navy blue suit that projected professionalism and dignity. Lenore came to watch Elliot, embracing Mallory tightly before she left. "Go make him pay," she whispered fiercely. "Go show that judge exactly what kind of man my son turned out to be." The courtroom was smaller than Mallory had imagined, but the judge, a woman in her late 50s named Patricia Morrison, had a presence that filled the space. She listened impassively as both attorneys presented their cases. Fiona was brilliant, laying out Trevor's pattern of deception, his affair, his loss of employment, his current unstable living situation in a small studio apartment across town. Trevor's attorney tried to paint him as a man who made a mistake, but was fundamentally a good father, someone who deserved equal custody and a chance to rebuild his relationship with his son. But when Fiona called Richard Whitmore to the stand to testify about the affair, about the lies, about how Trevor had helped destroy another family, the attorney's arguments crumbled under the weight of evidence. Lenore testified next, and Mallory watched Trevor's face crumble as his own mother spoke about her disappointment in him, about her concerns for Elliot's welfare, about how she believed Mallory was the more stable and trustworthy parent. It was devastating and necessary, and Mallory felt a rush of gratitude for this woman who had chosen integrity over blind loyalty to her son. When Judge Morrison finally spoke, her voice was firm and clear. "Mr. Sinclair, the evidence presented in this case paints a picture of a man who exercised profoundly poor judgment, who engaged in sustained deception, and who has recently experienced significant instability in both his personal and professional life. While I acknowledge that you love your son, love alone is not sufficient to determine custody arrangements." Trevor's attorney started to object, but Judge Morrison raised her hand. "I am awarding primary physical custody to Mrs. Sinclair, with Mr. Sinclair receiving visitation rights every other weekend and one evening per week. These visits will remain supervised for the next 6 months, at which point we will review the arrangement. Mr. Sinclair will pay child support in accordance with state guidelines, adjusted for his current employment status. As for the division of assets, this court awards Mrs. Sinclair the marital home and 3/4 of the couple's shared savings, given Mr. Sinclair's role in causing the dissolution of the marriage." The gavel came down with a sharp crack that seemed to echo through Mallory's entire body. It was over. She had won. Trevor had lost not just his marriage, but his career, his reputation, his home, and most painfully, the daily presence of his son in his life. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she mostly felt exhausted and hollow, like someone who had survived a natural disaster but lost everything in the process. Yes, she had won the legal battle, but the cost had been their family, Elliot's innocence, and any remaining illusion that happily ever after was something more than a fairy tale. Outside the courthouse, Fiona shook her hand with professional satisfaction. "You did well in there. He got exactly what he deserved. Thank you for everything you did." "Just doing my job. If you need anything else, any enforcement of the custody agreement or support payments, you call me immediately." Mallory nodded and watched her attorney walk away. She stood on the courthouse steps in the autumn sunshine, feeling the warmth on her face but not quite able to absorb it. Everything had changed. The life she had built was gone, but a new one was beginning to take shape, uncertain and fragile, but hers alone to define. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nadia. "How did it go?" "I won," Mallory typed back. "Primary custody, the apartment, everything Fiona asked for. I'm coming over tonight with celebration wine and comfort ice cream. We're going to toast to new beginnings." Mallory smiled slightly at that. New beginnings. It sounded hopeful, almost optimistic. Maybe someday she would feel hopeful again. Maybe someday she would be able to think about the future, without the shadow of betrayal hanging over everything. But not today. Today, She just needed to go home, hold her son, and start learning how to build a life from the ruins of the one that had been destroyed. 8 months had passed since the divorce was finalized. 8 months of learning to breathe again, of discovering who Mallory Sinclair was when she was not defined by being someone's wife. The apartment that had once felt suffocating with memories now felt like sanctuary. Every corner gradually reclaimed and remade into something that belonged solely to her and Elliot. The changes had come slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. She had repainted the bedroom in soft sage green, erasing the neutral beige that she and Trevor had chosen together. She had rearranged the furniture, bought new curtains, filled the space with plants that caught the morning light. Small acts of reclamation that added up to something larger, something that felt like healing. Elliot had adjusted better than Mallory had dared hope, though there had been difficult nights. Nights when he cried for his daddy, when he asked questions that had no good answers, when he needed reassurance that Mommy was not going anywhere, that he was safe and loved, and not responsible for the grown-up problems that had torn his family apart. The child therapist Mallory had found, a kind woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, had been instrumental in helping Elliot process the divorce in age-appropriate ways. Trevor saw his son every other weekend now, the supervised visits having ended after the 6-month review. He had found work at a call center, making a fraction of his previous salary, living in a cramped studio apartment that barely had room for the air mattress he inflated for Elliot's overnight stays. The child support payments came regularly, automatically deducted from his paycheck before he could spend the money elsewhere. Mallory had heard through Lenore that he was dating someone new, another woman from his office, but she felt nothing when she learned this information. No jealousy, no anger, just a distant acknowledgement that Trevor Sinclair was now a stranger whose life no longer intersected with hers beyond the necessary coordination of their son's schedule. Candace Whitmore had indeed moved to another state, fleeing the wreckage of her destroyed marriage and lost career. Mallory had heard from Richard one final time, about 6 months after the divorces were finalized. He had called to tell her that he had full custody of his 3 children, that Candace was rebuilding her life elsewhere, that he was learning to be a single parent and finding unexpected strength in the challenge. "I wanted to thank you," he had said, his voice warm despite the pain both of them had endured, "for being willing to testify, for sharing what you knew. It made all the difference in my custody case. My kids are doing better now. They're in therapy. They're adjusting. And I think we're going to be okay." "I'm glad," Mallory had replied sincerely. "Your children are lucky to have you. So is yours. Elliot is lucky to have a mother who fought for him, who protected him, who showed him what dignity looks like even in the worst circumstances." The words had stayed with Mallory long after that call ended. Dignity! It was something she had clung to throughout the entire nightmare, refusing to let Trevor's betrayal reduce her to bitterness or cruelty, refusing to use Elliot as a weapon, even when she had every legal and moral right to her rage. Lenore had become even more of a fixture in their lives, coming over twice a week for dinner, taking Elliot to the park on Saturday mornings, providing the kind of steady, unconditional love that anchored both Mallory and her grandson through the turbulent months of adjustment. She never spoke poorly of Trevor in front of Elliot, but in private moments with Mallory, she made her position clear. "What my son did was unforgivable," she had said one evening over tea, after Elliot had gone to bed. "I will always love him because he's my child, but I don't like him very much right now. Maybe someday he'll become the man I raised him to be, but until then, you and Elliot are my priority." Nadia remained a constant presence, the friend who had shown up when it mattered most, and never wavered. They had dinner together at least once a week, sometimes at restaurants, sometimes just ordering pizza and watching movies in Mallory's living room after Elliot fell asleep. It was Nadia who had been there for the worst moments, The nights when Mallory had broken down crying over something small that triggered memories of her failed marriage. The days when the loneliness felt crushing and permanent. "You're going to be okay," Nadia had told her again and again. "I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you're going to come through this stronger than you were before. You're going to build something beautiful from these ashes." Mallory had not believed her at first, but slowly, incrementally, she had begun to see the truth in those words. Work had become a refuge and a source of pride. Her manager position at the boutique had evolved into something more significant when the owner, impressed by Mallory's dedication during her personal crisis, had offered her a promotion to regional manager overseeing 3 stores. The raise had been substantial enough that Mallory could afford to keep the apartment without financial strain, could even begin saving for Elliot's future education. She threw herself into the work, finding satisfaction in the challenges, in building something that was entirely hers. Her team respected her, her boss valued her, and for the first time in years, Mallory felt like she was being seen for who she was, rather than who she was in relation to someone else. On a crisp Saturday morning in late autumn, Mallory stood in her kitchen making coffee and watching Elliot play with his toy cars on the living room floor. Sunlight streamed through the windows she had cleaned the day before, painting everything in golden light. The radio played softly, some songs she did not recognize, but that made her want to sway slightly as she poured cream into her mug. This was her life now. Simple, quiet, uncomplicated by lies or betrayal. She was not dating, had no interest in opening her heart to that kind of vulnerability again. At least, not yet. Maybe someday, when enough time had passed and the wounds had scarred over completely. But there was no rush. She was learning to be content with herself, to find joy in the small moments, to build a life that felt authentic and true. Elliot looked up from his toys and grinned at her. "Mommy, can we go to the park today? Grandma said there's a new playground with really big slides." "Absolutely. Let me finish my coffee and we'll go." His face lit up with pure, uncomplicated joy, and Mallory felt her heart expand in her chest. This child, this beautiful boy, who looked at her with such trust and love, was worth everything she had endured. Every painful moment, every difficult decision, every night spent crying into her pillow, all of it had been worth it to arrive at this place where they were safe and together and building something new. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lenore. "I'm at the park already with coffee and muffins. Bring that grandson of mine so I can spoil him properly." Mallory smiled and typed back, "On our way in 20 minutes." As she helped Elliot into his jacket and shoes, as she gathered their things and locked the apartment door behind them, Mallory realized something that took her breath away, with its simplicity and truth. She was happy. Not the giddy, unrealistic happiness of fairy tales, not the performance of happiness she had maintained during the final years of her marriage when cracks were already forming in the foundation. This was something quieter, deeper, more resilient. This was the happiness of someone who had been broken and had put herself back together, of someone who had faced betrayal and chosen dignity over bitterness, of someone who had fought for what mattered and won the things that truly counted. The park was crowded with families enjoying the autumn weather. Lenore sat on a bench near the new playground, waving enthusiastically when she spotted them. Elliot took off running toward his grandmother, and Mallory followed at a more measured pace, carrying the bag with snacks and water bottles. "There's my boy." Lenore scooped Elliot into a hug and handed him a chocolate chip muffin. "Go play on those slides while they're not too crowded." Elliot needed no further encouragement. He raced toward the playground equipment with the boundless energy of a 5-year-old who knew he was loved and safe. Mallory sat beside Lenore on the bench, accepting the coffee her mother-in-law offered. "He looks happy," Lenore observed, watching Elliot climb the ladder to the tallest slide. "He is happy. We both are." Lenore turned to study Mallory's face. and whatever she saw there made her smile with satisfaction. "You've done an incredible job, sweetheart. I know these past months have been hell, but you've handled everything with such grace. I'm proud of you." The words meant more than Lenore could possibly know. "Thank you for everything, for standing by us, for choosing us. It made all the difference." "You're my family," Lenore said simply. "Both of you. That doesn't change just because the marriage ended. Trevor made his choices, and they were terrible choices. But you and Elliot will always be part of my life." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Elliot play, watching other families navigate their own weekend routines. Mallory noticed a young couple nearby, the woman heavily pregnant, the man's hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. She felt no envy, no longing for what she had lost. That chapter of her life was closed, and she had made peace with the ending. "Have you heard from Trevor this week?" Lenore asked carefully. "Just texts about picking up Elliot for his weekend visit. Nothing personal." Mallory paused, then added, "I heard he's engaged to that woman from his office, the one he started dating a few months ago." Lenore's expression tightened with disapproval. "Already. He learns nothing. That poor woman has no idea what she's getting into. That's not our problem anymore." And Mallory meant it. Whatever happened in Trevor's life now was no longer her concern, no longer her burden to carry. He would make his choices and live with the consequences, just as she had made hers. The morning stretched into afternoon. They had lunch at the park, played on the playground equipment until Elliot declared himself exhausted, then walked to the ice cream shop 2 blocks away for an early autumn treat. It was beautifully, perfectly ordinary, and Mallory cherished every moment of it. That evening, after Lenore had left and Elliot was tucked into bed clutching his stuffed elephant, Mallory stood in her living room and looked around at the life she had built from the ruins of her marriage. The photos of her and Trevor were long gone, replaced by images of Elliot, of her and Nadia, of Lenore with her grandson. New memories, new beginnings, new chapters waiting to be written. She thought about the woman she had been 8 months ago, standing in this same space with a banana and knife arranged on a plate, waiting to confront her husband about his betrayal. That woman had been devastated, but not destroyed. That woman had found strength she did not know she possessed. That woman had fought for what mattered and refused to be diminished by someone else's failure to value what they had. Mallory picked up her phone and opened the photo album, scrolling back to that infamous photograph that Nadia had sent her, the one that had shattered everything. She looked at Trevor's face in the image, at the intimacy and desire so clearly visible, and felt nothing but distant gratitude. Gratitude that she had learned the truth before, wasting more years on a man who did not deserve her loyalty. Gratitude that the betrayal had happened before Elliot was old enough to have clear memories of a different family structure. Gratitude that she had been given the opportunity to discover her own strength. She deleted the photo. It had served its purpose. She no longer needed it as evidence or motivation or reminder. The past was the past, and she was ready to let it stay there. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nadia. "How was your day?" Mallory smiled and typed back. "It was good. Really, truly good. That's my girl. Want to grab brunch tomorrow after Elliot goes to Trevor's?" "Absolutely. I'll pick the place this time." "Deal. Love you." "Love you too." Mallory set down her phone and walked to Elliot's room, pushing the door open quietly to check on him one final time before bed. He slept peacefully, his face relaxed and innocent, his stuffed elephant tucked under one arm. She watched him breathe, this perfect person who had given her purpose through the darkest times, who reminded her daily what was worth fighting for. "Sweet dreams, baby," she whispered, pulling his blanket up slightly. "Mommy loves you more than anything in the world." She returned to her own bedroom, the one she had reclaimed and remade into a space that reflected who she was, rather than who she had been expected to be. She changed into comfortable pajamas, washed her face, and climbed into bed with a book she had been reading, a novel about second chances and unexpected beginnings. Before opening the book, Mallory allowed herself one moment of reflection. 8 months ago, her life had imploded. 8 months ago, she had discovered that the man she trusted most in the world had betrayed her in the most fundamental way possible. 8 months ago, she had stood in her kitchen at 2 in the morning, crying and wondering how she would survive the pain. But she had survived. More than survived. She had fought her way through the devastation and emerged on the other side as someone stronger, wiser, more resilient than she had been before. She had protected her son, maintained her dignity, and refused to let Trevor's betrayal define her future. The apartment was quiet around her, filled with the peaceful sounds of home. No lies, no secrets, no betrayals hidden behind smiles and false promises. Just honesty, safety, and the slow, steady work of building a life worth living. Mallory opened her book and began to read, losing herself in someone else's story, while her own story, the one she was writing with every choice and every day, continued to unfold in ways she could not yet predict, but no longer feared. She was not the same woman who had stood frozen in her boutique store, staring at a photograph that destroyed her world. She was not the same woman who had arranged a banana and knife on a plate as a symbol of everything that was ending. She had been broken and had healed. She had been betrayed and had chosen not to become bitter. She had lost the life she thought she wanted and had discovered that she was capable of building something even better. The future was uncertain, as it always had been. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Mallory was not afraid of that uncertainty. She had learned that she could handle whatever came next. She had proven to herself that she was stronger than her worst moments, more resilient than her deepest pain. And that knowledge, that hard-won understanding of her own strength, was worth more than any marriage that required her to diminish herself to maintain it. Trevor had taken many things from her, but he had also, inadvertently, given her something invaluable. He had given her the opportunity to discover who she truly was when everything else was stripped away. She was Mallory Sinclair. She was a mother, a friend, a professional, a survivor. She was someone who valued honesty and dignity and integrity. She was someone who fought for what mattered and let go of what did not. She was someone who had been knocked down and had gotten back up, who had been broken and had put herself back together in a shape that was entirely her own. And she was at peace. Outside her window, the city lights twinkled in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Trevor was living his own life, facing his own consequences, making his own choices. Somewhere out there, Candace was rebuilding in another state, learning her own lessons about the price of betrayal. Somewhere out there, other families were navigating their own challenges, their own moments of crisis and decision. But here, in this small apartment filled with love and hard-won peace, Mallory Sinclair was exactly where she needed to be. She had survived the storm. She had found her way through the darkness, and she had emerged into light that was all the more precious for how dearly it had been bought. She read until her eyes grew heavy, until the words on the page began to blur. She set the book aside, turned off the lamp, and settled into sleep with a calmness that would have seemed impossible 8 months ago. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new moments of joy and difficulty, new opportunities to prove to herself that she was capable of handling whatever life offered. But tonight, she was simply grateful. Grateful for Elliot sleeping peacefully in the next room. Grateful for Lenore's unwavering support and Nadia's loyal friendship. Grateful for the work that gave her purpose and the apartment that gave her sanctuary. Grateful for the strength she had discovered within herself, for the dignity she had maintained, for the future she was building one day at a time. The banana and knife seemed like something from another lifetime, a symbol of an ending that had ultimately become a beginning. Trevor's betrayal had destroyed her marriage, but had not destroyed her. And in the end, that made all the difference. Mallory Sinclair drifted into sleep with a slight smile on her face, dreaming of park visits and ice cream and the simple, perfect joy of Sunday mornings with her son. She had lost the fairy tale, but had gained something far more valuable: the knowledge that she was strong enough to write her own story, one that did not need someone else's approval to be complete. And that was the happiest ending of all. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.